What's up, people? Welcome back to 4Bet Blind. My name is Will. I'm back at Beach Poker Club for this session, and this was a fun one. I went to the room on a random Monday afternoon, and as soon as I arrived, a friend pulled me aside and told me I had to get on his table, as there were two players named Tortilla Joe and Saucy Jack who were playing incredibly loose and driving all the action. Now, I had no idea who these players were, but when the players at a table have nicknames like fucking professional wrestlers, you know it's gonna be lit. So I grab $400 in chips and take my seat. It doesn't take me long to get involved in the action, as early on I'm dealt pocket aces in the cutoff. There's a straddle to $4, so I open a 20, and it folds all the way to the player I'm calling Saucy Jack in the straddle. Just to provide some context, I had been at the room for less than 30 minutes and had already seen Jack hit the ATM twice, so I know he's not afraid to get in the mix. He calls the 20 and we go heads up to a flop that comes king, 10, king with a flush draw. He checks and I decide to bet $20. He makes the call and we're off to a turn which comes the 10 of spades, now double pairing the board. He checks once more, and this is a card I'm probably going to be checking back at relatively high frequency, so I decide to check back here to keep some decently strong hands in my range. The river is the deuce of clubs, and out of nowhere, my opponent decides he's Barack Obama, and the pot is an Afghan hospital, cause he bombs the hell out of it, betting 215 into around 80. This is kind of an interesting spot, as he defended his straddle, which means he can have all sorts of 10x and king x he might not normally have. On the other hand, I unblock all the queen jack, jack 9, queen 9 type hands that might bluff here, as well as unblocking diamonds. The final factor is a hand I saw Jack play a little earlier in the session where he said out loud, "What the hell am I doing?" as he called a flop bet. He actually ended up winning that hand, making runner trips with a hand that had no business calling the flop. With all that information in mind, I flick in the chips and my opponent says, "Good call," and shows jack 9 offsuit for the miss straight. Pretty nice pot to kick things off. The next interesting hand starts with two players in early position posting their missed blinds, the low jack, cutoff, and button all over limp before I look down at jack 3 in the big blind. I check and the six of us are off to a flop which comes tray 5 jack with two spades, giving me top and bottom pair. This is a spot where I think a bet is fairly standard, but I'm pretty sure Tortilla Joe or Saucy Jack are going to bet any sort of equity they may have flopped, so I decide to set the trap and check. The action checks to Jack in the cutoff, who doesn't disappoint. He bets 35 into 15. It folds all the way back to me, and I haven't been this excited since my dad got transferred to the penitentiary just down the street. I raise to 125. Things take a bit of an unexpected turn when Tortilla Joe cold calls the 125 and Jack ends up tank folding. Just to provide a little bit of context on Tortilla Joe, during our conversations at the table, he mentioned that his dad worked in a prominent position for a Latin American government. He also was discussing how one of his construction companies was struggling with regulatory issues, so I don't get the impression this guy's hurting for money at all. So I keep that in mind as we go heads up to a turn which brings an offsuit 8. Not much has changed here, and I'm looking to continue piling money into the pot considering he just flat called the flop, so I bet 225. He's thinking things over and deliberating. There's a little bit of chatter when all of a sudden he says, "I'm on." Another unexpected move from Joe. Definitely wasn't anticipating a jam, but it's only about 225 more to me. There's over 900 in there, and if he happens to have flopped a set and smooth called the flop, maybe this money will help him grease the wheels of bureaucracy. So I make the call. The river is an offsuit queen, and I table my hand. My opponent gives me a glance before tabling 3-5 of hearts, so he flopped bottom 2 pair, a bit of a cooler there. Although I'm not so sure about stacking off with an SPR of about 40 to 1 in a limped pot 6 ways with bottom 2 pair, but then again, I don't own multiple construction companies. A few orbits pass before the next hand where I'm dealt jack 10 of clubs in early position. I open to 15 and get called by +2, the button, and both blinds, so we go 5 ways to a flop that comes 8-3 deuce with 2 clubs. Both blinds check, and with only the jack high flush draw, I'm not looking to bet, so I check as well. Joe decides to put an end to our friendly dynamic, however, and bets $80. The button only has $71 left, but makes the call, and the small blind calls 80 before it gets back to me. I'm getting almost 4-1, have 2 overcards that could give me the best hand, and have an opportunity to play a side pot against both Joe and Jack, 2 players who are capable of being super wide here. So I make the call and we go 4 ways to the turn with 1 player all in. The turn is a lovely king of clubs, giving me the 3rd nut flush. Jack checks the small blind and the action is on me. Considering how loose these players have been playing, I think I can extract some value here, so I lead for 175. Tortilla Joe makes the call while Jack folds the small blind, so now we're heads up on the side heading to a big river. The 5 of diamonds on the end doesn't change much, and now it's time to decide how much my Jack high flush is worth. I know Joe is capable of having lower flushes like 45 and 46, and maybe even a hand like deuce 4. He also has a ton of nut flush combos that could have just flatted the turn. If you're a regular viewer of the vlog, you've seen me bet the river relentlessly, and this spot is no exception. I bet 350 and Joe snap calls. I table my hand and he defiantly throws down his cards, tabling queen 9 of clubs. The button eventually shows his hand and he had ace 6 of clubs for the nut flush, so pretty crazy to see 3 flushes in one hand. A few final thoughts on this hand. I think there are 2 points where I could have played this hand much better. The first is the flop. When 3 players continue on this board texture, I think Jack 10 might be best played as a fold. Given the suitedness of live players' continuing range, I think this hand is just a touch too weak to continue. The other play I could have made would be to either check the river or size down considerably. In game, I thought I bet around 40%, when in reality I was much closer to half pot. Sizing down minimizes the loss when we get called by better, while making those lower flushes I was trying to target more likely to call. And even then, checking still might be best. I guess continually shooting my shot when prospects are low is built into my DNA, otherwise I wouldn't be banned from stepping within 500 yards of Taylor Swift. At this point in the session, the game is winding down and we're playing 3-handed. Of course, the other 2 players are Tortilla Joe and Saucy Jack, so there's no way I could possibly leave until they get up. This hand starts with a Tortilla Joe button straddle to 5 and Saucy Jack folding the small blind. I'm in the big blind with King 10 offsuit. Seems good enough for a raise, so I make it $20. He calls and we're off to a flop, which comes 9 ace queen with 2 hearts. With a gutter to Broadway and some future bluffing opportunities with the King of Hearts, I decide to c-bet and size up to $30. He double checks his cards before deciding on a call. The turn brings the 3 of diamonds, changing very little. I can still represent the considerable nut advantage I have on this board texture, so I decide to put this hand into my double barrel range and bet $75, around 3/4 of the pot. Joe instantly calls, so I think he's less likely to have a monster like 2 pair or a set, as those hands would likely at least consider a raise. I make this mental note as we head to the river. I'm really hoping for either a jack or a heart, and wouldn't you know it, the river is the... Oh shit, I fucked up the graphics, hold on. Oh, and I went all in, spoiler alert. Okay, pause the video and write down your prediction for what the river was. And while you're paused, go ahead and like and subscribe to help the channel grow. Okay, do you have your prediction? The river was the 8 of spades, a little bit different. Here's what I was thinking in this spot. I have the 10 of clubs, which reduces the number of Jack 10 combos my opponent could have. His very quick call on the turn reduces the number of 2 pair combos he could have, as I think most players would play a raise or at least take a moment to consider it. And for all his looseness, Tortilla Joe was one of the players who was trying to win at this table, and I could tell he took pride in making the correct decision. So with all that in mind, I decided to go for it, betting 445 into about 250. Joe immediately asks for a count and goes deep into the tank. His body language looks a little annoyed, and I think he realizes how large this bet is, as you can see him spread the pot. After about a minute, we hear the magic words.
Echo.
Joe shows ace 3 for 2 pair, and I get stacked on the final hand of the session. Shout out to Joe for playing this hand really well. That was a sharp, smooth call on the turn that set up a great spot for him on the river. I really enjoyed playing with him and thought he played well. After this, I go to the one place that will make me feel better, enjoy some quality cuisine, and spend some time relaxing in my car. Let me know what you think of the hands, how hard did I punt, leave me a comment, and as always, please like and subscribe to help the channel grow. See y'all in the next one.